Thank you for your introduction. I do also want to thank Heather and Courtney for excellent job they've done in organizing this session. It's been a lot of work, really masterful, well done, thank you. And I'm delighted to be part of this session today. I'm delighted to talk about the National Household Food Acquisition and Purchase Survey, for short, FoodAPS. This is USDA's new survey. It's designed to provide data that weren't available before to support rigorous research on food and nutrition issues. And this effort has been done jointly with the Economic Research Service, where I work, and the USDA Food and Nutrition Service. For those of you who are unfamiliar with ERS, let me just quickly say that Economic Research Service is the research arm of the agency. Its mission is to inform and enhance public and private decision-making on economic and policy issues related to agriculture, food, environment, and rural development. And the way we do it is by staying very close to our stakeholders, understanding what they need, anticipating future questions, putting the data together, doing the rigorous analysis, and putting out the findings in the form that people can use in the right place, to the right audience, at the right time. So let me just, by way of setting up the presentation, just quickly go over three sets of data that we are used to seeing and using, and what they generally say and find. The first set really is aggregate data on what the system provides for consumers to use. Here, the well-known food availability data, long time series, uses supply and use framework and provides estimates of commodities, agricultural commodities, for 200 agricultural commodities available in the system. It adjusts it for food loss to estimate consumption, and it drives nutrients from that. What these data set show essentially is that calorie on per capita per day available to people has increased from 2077 to 2590, about 25% in 2010, and the two leading sectors are added fats and oil, and then grains. Of course, these data don't tell us anything about the populations at risk. We can't figure out who is at risk of overconsumption, who is at risk of nutrition deficiencies, and for that, you've heard some of these data that were mentioned this morning, relying on 24-hour dietary recall, dietary records, and food frequency questionnaires, where we find out who is consuming what kind of food. This morning, someone raised the question, how do we know how much commodities are in foods people eat? And on Wednesday of this last week, ERS connected these two data sets together, and now we have estimates for how much of these commodities are present in the 63 foods that are coming from what we eat in America from NHANES. That was just a sidebar comment, just the question you raised this morning. The third set of, okay, so what are these data show? Really show that consumers have changed their preferences toward consuming foods away from home. And it's not surprising then to see that the caloric intake has also shifted, the contribution of calorie from food away from home has increased quite significantly, and particularly for fast food from 68, from 3 to 13%, the blue wedge. The third set of data sets that we've been using is more of an economic type. You're looking at expenditures. This is consumer expenditure survey, aggregate data for aggregate commodities, some demographic information on how much people are spending on what kind of food. No quantities, no prices. Then there are a second set of data, sales data, that you can get some details on what's being sold, quantities, expenditures, no demographic information. Then the third set is from households. These are proprietary data, such as home scan. IRI has its own version. And here you have all of the details of quantities and prices and the demographic information and what's bought where. So you can do some fancy analysis. But frankly, they're missing the low-income folks. And they're also missing the very high-income folks. These kinds of people don't have the time, apparently, to scan the foods that they purchase. So with this, what we did, FNS and ERS, we approached our academic colleagues, those who are in the know, in the policy circles, our stakeholders, and asked them, engage them to tell us what questions remain to be answered. What are the important questions are out there that we need to answer and we can't because of data gaps. And we came up with four very important ones, and those were the questions that drove FoodAPS. It shaped it, and it also defined the content of it. Here are the four questions. If you don't know the details of what people are purchasing, not intake, purchasing, acquiring, you're not going to be able to compare, let's say, those who are on supplemental nutrition assistance program, over $80 billion program, to the rest of the population. Worse, you can't even compare them to those who qualify for SNAP but decide not to participate. You can't answer or analyze the connection between knowledge on diet and nutrition to their choices. Does it matter that they know what's good for them or not? Does it impact their choices of what they're purchasing, what they're acquiring? You've heard a lot about food access and food desert area. If someone lives in a food desert area, does that necessarily mean they're getting poor variety, higher prices, low nutritional quality of foods? Finally, food security is an important issue for the country. And does it have anything to do with supplemental nutrition assistance program? What effects does that have on food security? How does disability affect food security? How does consumer shopping strategies affect food security and living in the higher cost living areas? So what is FoodAPS? It's really more than a survey. It's a multiple type of information from multiple sources. It gathers details, price and quantities of all food acquired from all household members, 5,000 of them, over 7 days period. It also emphasizes food at home and food away from home equally. What it isn't is that it's not intake. It's not about consumption. It's all about the economic decisions people make, the whys behind the buys. It's not longitudinal, and it's certainly not an app, at least yet, for your FoodAPS. There's no space between food and app. It's one word, and it stands for the National Food Acquisition and Purchase Survey. Target population, nationally representative of 4 subgroups. 1,500 target of SNAP participants, and the rest, 1,500 below 100% of federal poverty threshold, 1,200 between 101 and 108 for 84% of federal poverty limit, and those who are higher income, 185% above the federal poverty threshold. It's really unlike any other survey. It's not recall. We have given people or gave people a scanner where they scanned all the foods they purchased. This is for food at home. It emphasized again, food away from home and food at home, and for food away from home, each member received a diary. They reported the foods they obtained away from home. It's from all sources: groceries, school, restaurants, vending machine, coffee machine, fishing, game. And we have the distances from where people are, where the acquisitions occurred. We know where they went shopping. We know where the households are. These were calculated. The receipts were kept. They informed us of it. For food away from home, the same way. People called in where they went for food away from home. Our systems were able to identify where they went shopping, and the distances were calculated. The travel mode is also known. The last bullet is really the contribution that, majority of the contribution that FoodAPS has made. Data is very comprehensive. It's consistent. And it's rich because it relies on extant data very heavily. The first is proprietary data, 5.5 terabytes of information from all retailers, whatever they've sold, and these are the retailers that are around our respondents. The aim here is to understand the local food environment that these households are in, because we know where respondents are in, that's the environment, their local food that they're in, that impacts their choices. The density of food away from home, density of food at home, what relative prices were. If there's Whole Foods across the street and I drive 10 miles away to Costco, why do I do that? There are other information about the local environment the response are in, and so that's for later, we can talk about that. The second extant data we have relied on is administrative records. We obtained 95% informed consent from those who were participating in SNAP to allow us to link back to their administrative records so that we know what their benefit levels are, how long they've been on that program, and what they're reporting in total as to what their purchases were. These data really helped us clean the data and improve the quality of the data. Finally, nutrition information. And we linked up to ERS, FNDDS, and SR, and brought nutrient information for every item that was reported to us. And here is the 9 days. The 7 days from 1 to 7 is where people reported their acquisitions. On the first day, we obtained their demographics and trained them and asked them about program participation. The 9th day, we obtained dietary knowledge information from them, security status, finances, income, non-food expenditures, major ones that impact their purchases, and also shopping skills. We paid them the incentives and collected the material from them. So I want to say a few words about nutrient linking to items. We had 140 items, 140,000 items for food away from home. And we had about 116,000 items of, actually the reverse, 140,000 food at home items and 116,000 food away from home. Linking these items to nutrients required us to be able to find these data on FNDDS and SR, and it wasn't that easy to do. Our aim really is to be able to do a whole series of studies using healthy eating index, whether it's a retail store that the respondents are shopping at, whether it's their basket of food, whether it's dietary guideline, it opens up the door for a whole host of research that can be done using these data. But to do it, you really need to have the food pattern equivalence that was referred to and the HEIs. And here are the two data sets that we relied on, but they're designed mostly for food as consumed and not for food as purchased. And so it was not as easy as one would think. Here's an example. So you go into FoodAPS and Kraft's macaroni cheese. So you have the UPCs and you identify it, you know which it is and you know the quantities, but now you want to go into FNDDS or SR and find the FBE as purchased. Which one do you think it's there or it's not? It's really hard to do. Well, it's this one. But it takes a long time to figure something like that. The second thing that we found was that ARS and SR and FNDDS do not have ethnic foods or basically newer foods, such as these. And so what we had to do was to create the food codes ourselves for these kinds of data. So what do you do with these data? What can you do with them? Quite a lot, actually. But here's an example. This relates to food access. So how do low-income and other households travel to their usual food shopping stores? How far do they travel? What type of stores do they go to? What are the reasons for shopping at these primary stores? And whether supermarket proximity has anything to do with food security and dietary quality? Are transportation limitations related to food security and diet quality? We have a number of publications. The first one that came out answered these three. Do SNAP and other low-income households use different modes of transportation to shop for groceries? Do they shop at the stores closer to them? Or do they shop at different types of stores? So in this graph, each bar represents one of those four target groups. First one is the SNAP, second one is those below the 100% of federal poverty limit. Third one is between 100 and 185, and the last one is those higher income. The vertical axis is the percentage of household using travel mode, whether by using their own car, the blue, someone else's car, the brown, or walk, bike, and take public transportation. So what you find here is that most households use their own vehicle to shop for groceries, but SNAP and low-income participants are less likely to do so. So how about how far they travel? Again, each pair of these bars represents those four groups, and the vertical axis here is miles. The bar in brown is the distance to the SNAP authorized supermarket nearest, or supercenter nearest the respondent. What is interesting is that people bypass the closest supermarket and supercenter, and they all go above 3 miles to do so. So households, do they go to their primary shopping store? Is the primary shopping store different for each of these groups? One would think they would, but when you look at this, most households do their primary shopping in stores at supermarkets and supercenters, by far. So the blue bar is the supercenter, the red bar is supermarkets, the green is other stores, and the purple one is unknown. Why do they do that? So we did a cross tab here. look at the total. This is just for low-income people and SNAP. What they're saying is that low prices is the most important thing. Second thing is how close they are. Those who use both, 19%. So, but let's look at the low price. And what you see is that 59% travel 10 miles. Or put it the other way, 59% of those who travel 10 miles are saying they're traveling because of low prices. Reverse is here. 51% of those who travel half a mile, less than half a mile, they say they do that because it's close. So, what else can you do? We have 53 pieces of research underway. These were conducted through call for papers, University of Kentucky Center for Poverty Research and National Bureau of Economic Research announced 2 series of call for papers. For UK CPR, we received something like 60 proposals, out of which we selected 12. From NBER, we got 40 proposals. We have selected 10 of those. And here is some critical policy issues that you can look at. How do SNAP and low-income households' characteristics impact store choices and nutritional quality? Do living in higher cost areas and higher relative prices of healthy foods affect the ability to acquire nutritionally healthy foods? Does the lack of access to food stores with desirable distance, attractive prices, and variety affect nutritional quality of the basket of foods you buy? And do product availability and access affect food choices and food quality, I should say, in rural areas differently than urban? Thank you. Here's the information on FoodAPS data, research uses. The link is there, my name is there, email is there. If you have any questions, I'm delighted to help you out with it.
Hi, Mark. This is Diego Rose, Tulane University. Great presentation, Mark. Really important piece of research you're doing. You mentioned in the introduction that proprietary data sources have problems in that they don't get much of the low-income population, and they also they clip off the really high income because they don't have time to do this stuff. And I looked at, in looking at your procedures there, it seems like the scanning is for foods with barcodes, but the at-home scanning for produce seems like it would have to be entered. There's also the issue around away-from-home foods, all of which seems like that would take a lot of time and effort to enter. So it sounds like you're getting pretty cooperative respondents. Do you sense the same sort of bias there? Do you have, are you getting a biased sample that are particularly motivated about food and nutrition to do this in the first place?
Let me see if I understood your question so I can answer it properly. Our sample is a random sample of 5,000 households. And what we did was we approached the states, we obtained their administrative records, matched it to the USPS delivery database, and created 2 distinct frames. One for those who participated in a SNAP and those who didn't. And then we randomly draw from those. After we obtained the data from them, food away from home was written down and they were called in. So when they called in with a receipt to say, I went to this such and such a restaurant, and the interviewer would say, where is it, where are you, and how much the distance is, and so on and so forth. We obtained the details there from prices and quantities of what they purchased. For food at home, they scanned it. And so we had to match that scanned UPC to our own database, which came from a dictionary that IRI, Gladson, there were 3 different dictionaries, Nielsen provided. IRI's dictionary has 1 million UPCs, just by itself. Having said that, still there were items people reported that weren't in either one of those dictionaries. Ethnic foods are one, and private label are the other. So we had to dig in and get that information. I hope I answered your question.
Okay, great.
Let's thank Mark once again for his presentation.